Welcome to Mastering Sales Leadership, the podcast where today's top B2B revenue leaders share how they forecast, grow, and allocate resources in an unpredictable world. Each episode features candid conversations with CROs, sales executives, RevOps leaders, investors, and industry experts who reveal the strategies, frameworks, and lessons behind building high-performance sales organizations. From forecasting, risk, and pipeline quality, to leadership, execution, and growth, we explore what actually drives results. Here is your host, Bill Cantor.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mastering Sales Leadership. Today, my guest is an engineer by training, a former venture capitalist, and now an operating executive. He was recently brought in by the board to lead his transformation of his current company. He's the CEO of Sift Science, a leading fraud prevention platform. And when he's not working, he's a competitive triathlete. We'll hear a little bit about that later on. And with that, everybody, meet my guest today, Marc Friend. Marc, welcome to Mastering Sales Leadership podcast.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
I'm glad you're here, Marc. Marc, today we're going to talk about sales transformation, which happens to be one of your areas of expertise. We'll start with what sales transformation means to you and then discuss how to align an organization around it. And finally, explore what it takes to sustain continuous improvement. And for those who stick around to the end, Marc's going to share his secret of how he gets a company aligned on go-to-market activities so they're more productive. And I'm sure we'll all be interested in hearing about that. Marc, before we get into sales transformation, you've had a very unusual career path. You were an engineer, a venture capitalist, and now a CEO. And, I'm sure there are some lessons from those earlier experiences that influence how you lead sales and lead an organization today. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, great place to start. So I'm an MIT grad, was trained in electrical engineering and signal processing. So I have kind of a systems theory approach to everything and think in terms of systems. And when you're running a company, it's also a system. So as a CFO, I was architecting the system, the business from a financial standpoint. But early in my career, I did have experiences in startups and venture, and ended up spending a good chunk of time, almost 15 years in venture capital, and just felt like I was on the sidelines. And I always enjoyed the three founders and a whiteboard type conversations. And I really felt like I needed to be in the game. And that led me to finding a startup to join. And then the notable fact is that the first startup I joined was a company in the no-code, low-code business and business process management software. Very revolutionary product. And I loved the founding CEO. He was a great product visionary. And the seat at the table was CFO. And I took it. So
Everybody else stepped back faster than you. Was that the problem?
prior to that day, I thought of myself as a product guy.
No, you raised your hand. You actually raised your hand. Okay.
And I said, I can do this, and became CFO and later COO. He essentially needed a number two to run the company, the internals. And that was the task, but the CFO was the title, and stayed with that title through a few companies, as well as COO title, and then eventually CEO.
Yeah. Okay. And a full disclosure here to the listeners, Marc's fund was an investor in one of my prior companies, which we were all very happy with the outcome of.
Indeed.
So that was fun. I hope to do it again, as we all do. All right. So let's move on. Marc, sales transformation means a lot of different things to different people. So when you use the term, what does it mean to you, and relate that to what you're doing at Sift today?
So let's start with what kind of sales organizations there are. I think it's defined by the company and the industry. I look at the world and see three types. One is order takers. The second is socket salesmen or salespeople. And the third is value selling. And I would look at the company that you're in and what the stage of growth they're in. And you look at someone like Snowflake. And I would argue that, and maybe even Salesforce, they don't sell, they take orders. And when a customer comes in, they know they want Snowflake. It's an issue of how do I orchestrate the sale? How do I maximize revenue? How do I get the right pricing, etc.? And that's order taking. And then there are socket salesmen, right? So I might work at Oracle or MongoDB, where my customers know they need a database, and it's a question of me versus someone else. Yeah, there is a socket, in the sense of like a chip on a circuit board. There's a socket for a piece of software or technology to go into, and it's just, is it mine or theirs? And then there's value selling. And for those of us who are in early growth companies or later stage growth companies, that's pretty much where we live. And so finding real value salespeople is very difficult. They're much more rare, and building around that is important. So the second dimension is just one of process. So having kind of the engineering background and thinking in systems processing, there's a reason we have stages, sales stages. And the goal of any sales interaction is different depending on the stage. And younger salespeople or inexperienced salespeople think that every time they're in front of the customer, they're trying to sell and close the deal. When in fact, I may just want to educate the customer. I may just want to find their needs and find their pains. I might want to size their pains. I might need to know who's the decision maker and what's the decision-making process. And so it's really important to define the various sales stages, the gates that move an opportunity between one and the other, and build the systems and tools around that. And I think a lot of us get that wrong.
Mm-hmm. Is there a third part to that? Just those two. You had process and the different types of selling.
Well, I think it's the process is also defined as what we're trying to get out of any stage in the process. But I really think it in transformation. I mean, we'll talk about getting in front of the customer for sure, but it's how do I gate my sales process? How do I create communications ladders so that my salesperson's talking to the lead on the other side, the economic buyer, my sales engineer is talking to their technical lead, and I'm talking to executive sponsor. So there is that dimension as well. But I think a lot of it comes down to building out a selling process arduously and sticking to it.
So, which of those stages are you at with Sift? Are you in the value selling stage, the socket selling stage, or the order taking stage?
We are a little bit of socket selling and value selling, but it is a known market. There's our known needs. There are known competitors, but we differ in our approach. And so we have to sell our approach and the value we bring to the table, as well as selling the value to customers who are just coming upon fraud for the first time. So, the sweet spot of our selling is often in the, call it $100 to $200 million size company in commerce of some sort. We're protecting for e-commerce and online transactions, and they might have an average of 2.5% fraud exposure. So, $2 to $5 million of fraud exposure, and they're willing to, to spend enterprise dollars to solve the problem.
Yeah, to solve that problem. I see. So, okay, so you're between value selling and socket selling, and it seems to me that as you talked about that, the difference is that in the order taking stage, you're really just negotiating a price and maybe delivery. In the socket selling stage, you're probably focused on selection, but in the value selling stage, you're focused on justifying the funding and of the project as well. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. Well, let me clarify, because these are two distinct ideas. One is, the type of selling that we're doing, whether we're value selling or socket selling, is really defined by the market and where we are in that market. And so I still put us as value selling, even though we're a pretty well-known entity and fraud is a well-known dimension. Um, and then when I say put rigor around sales stages, I'm thinking of the classic stages of discovery and needs analysis and um, alignment and proof of concept, et cetera. So the classic sales stages, as you would define, for example, in Salesforce. And the point there is that um, it's important to know exactly what your ask is at every step of the process and get that and no more and get out. When you get the answer you need, you're done.
You got to, meaning you have a well-defined process and stick to the disciplined use of it as you progress through the sales process.
Indeed, there's no way to actually track, to measure how you're doing, the value of your pipeline, et cetera, if you don't really distinctly define the stages and understand the gating of what differentiates one stage from another. Plus, the customers, they have a buying process, and we need to align to their buying process and understanding their buying time. But one of the interesting things is, companies, and I've consulted a lot, I've been on boards that, custom companies they say, oh, well, we have, an 18-month sales cycle. And I find that interesting because I don't know a company that has an 18-month buying cycle. And what that tells me is that they're working deals that aren't deals, right?
It's a good observation. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
Well, that's to be fair, Mark, that's probably because the company doesn't realize they're buying until much later in the process, when a good sales rep from a value selling organization has convinced someone that there is a problem that they need to solve that was latent. And so your salespeople have done a good job.
that I understand, but also I think to that point, I've often told my salespeople to stop selling. I want them to educate, right? So the evolution is we want them to know us, to like us, and to trust us. And if we get a prospect to trust us and understand that we're experts in what we do, they're likely to buy. And you get there through education, right? I'm not going to convince people of something they don't already believe. I'm going to educate them as to how I can solve their problem. I can't convince them they have a problem. I can educate them as to why I think they have a problem. So education is absolutely critical.
Okay, so when you arrived at Sift, what was the obvious transformation that was needed, and what convinced you needed a transformation, and how are you implementing that?
Well, I think as is well known in the valley and in technology, leaders oftentimes are very, very good at different stages of the company. There are great founders who are great CEOs from 0 to 20 million, but kind of running out of steam. There's CEOs who can take a company to 50 or 100 million and run out of steam. There's leaders who can scale 100 to 500 million. And, we had grown aggressively throughout our history and had flattened out a bit. And the board recognized that part of that was due to leadership. And coming in from the outside, it was pretty clear, and the team made it pretty clear that in fact there were leadership challenges, not only at the CEO level, but in some of the leaders of the various departments. So it was evident to me coming in and from actually the current leadership and the founder chairman that there was new leadership needed, new CEO needed, but also departmental leaders and experts in each department. And so I had the good fortune to have a deep Rolodex, having been in the Valley for 30 years, and being able to bring in leaders in engineering and product and marketing and customer success that had worked with me in the past and that I've known for over a decade.
And this is not just a sales transformation, then it's a product transformation. You're really transforming a whole company.
Full company transformation, but certainly sales is part of it. And the first point of focus was in product and engineering. We didn't have clear goals we would get to 80% of development on 100 different things and not deliver. And so we focused on development velocity, and we literally increased development velocity by about 5 times in terms of the number of feature requests and bug fixes and epics that we were completing as seen by the customer, not just from our own internal metrics.
Hmm. And, is it working? I mean, how do you know if it's working? Do you have any early indicators that it's working?
Absolutely. Customers are excited and and surprised at how fast we're delivering. I guess the other thing that was huge in transformation is really tearing down the silos between teams and getting the executives in front of the customer. So getting in front of the customer is always priority number one, and showing up and saying, hey, you've been working with our team, at the manager level and at the technical level, but I'm showing up, or our chief strategy officer or chief product officer is showing up, and we're presenting what our product roadmap is. And it gives customers great confidence in where we're going. And then they see the accelerated development and the delivery and the bug fixes that maybe, or feature requests that maybe they've been asking for some time. And that, again, brings confidence to the relationship. And, that begets more deals and better relationships and growth.
Okay, so all right, let's move on to the alignment here. You've got different parts of the organization that are used to doing different things. Once you've decided that some transformation is necessary, how do you align the organization around the need for it and get them working together?
Someone once said that communication is the answer to the problem, always. And so we do work internally and externally. Internally, we make sure that the product team presents to the go-to-market side of the house very frequently and is very visible and open with what's happening, what's working, what's coming next. And the sales team, interacts with the rest of the company, and the customer success team presents to the entire company, and executives show up for all of those meetings. You know, it's remarkable, but showing up is probably 90% of the game. And I found that in companies I've come in to lead, where transformation is needed, leadership and showing up and communications, just core capabilities, are missing. And I'm shocked by the number of times that my team at all levels will say, well, we never had this before. Or I had a customer who told me I wasn't sure if I should show up to this meeting because the past CEO stood me up a couple times, which is remarkable to me. And I know things happen, and I understand, there are complexities, but you got to gain people's trust. You have to gain your employees' trust and your customers' trust, and communication always solves that problem.
And do you find that people are working on the right things, or are they, still, sometimes working on things you say, why are we doing that?
When you have rapid growth, you find that unless you have very strong leadership, the organization grows to solve kind of, or optimize for local optimization, not global optimization. And the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing because everyone's growing so fast, and organizations get complex and siloed. And so, the first thing we did was we looked at, for instance, customer product requests, and management had kind of overburdened engineers and not given them direction, and people working on tickets at the individual level rather than at the team level or organization level. And we reorganized the teams, and we gave them clear directives and prioritized product delivery, and everyone is working on very well documented and well um, articulated goals and features and products within the entire organization. And the sales and support organizations understand what's coming down the pipeline, so nobody is surprised. So salespeople in an organization where development is choppy will lack confidence, and they'll be in front of a customer and they don't know if features are working or what's really coming down the pipe, right? Because they've been burned.
Or to actually be delivered, right? Yeah. Yeah, we've all been there, yeah.
So prioritizing and doing what we say we're going to do is a huge part of gaining trust internally.
So, Mark, one of the things that I've observed that, and you're kind of in the middle here, but when I talk to chief revenue officers, this is one of the common grouses. The board sets the plan here or wants it there, and you get an estimate that we're going to do half of that. Say, just some aspirational number. We're going to do still pretty good, but not meeting the aspiration. You're kind of caught in the middle there. How do you reconcile those things when the plan is aggressive and the resources, market, your know-how maybe, and your deals don't support where you're trying to get to?
So that is a common problem and a great question. And the answer is a board should not be setting those goals. And when I looked at the company, there was burnout. And we had the luxury of having employees with 4-year, 6-year, 8-year tenure. And they were burned out. And someone pointed me to a study, which I thought was brilliant, that said burnout is a combination of three things: physical exhaustion, a lack of agency, and a lack of wins. And so people who love to talk about culture, we'll talk about, communications and supporting your team. But at the end of the day, they need wins, right? And so we had to design a plan where it was clear that we could have some early wins and multiple wins, because then working hard doesn't get you burned out. You stay exhilarated because, hey, I'm delivering wins every week or two.
At least we got some wins. Yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't hear about stories in Apple or in Nvidia or Netflix where people just get burned out because they're just continuously winning, right? I mean, and those companies work insanely hard. And the difference is, you've got to measure people, um, and you've got to give them a chance to have wins in whatever period is relevant to them, the weekly, monthly, quarterly. So some teams have natural cadence and some you have to create cadence. But, defining goals that are achievable is key. And in our case, the board wants, a successful outcome. And they explicitly gave me the latitude to set the plan. And they want to see, and they know that the win will take time. A successful outcome will take time. And, there is kind of a timeline, but I set the plan in order for us to have early wins and often wins.
Yeah. So I have to ask, how did you come up with what's a reasonable plan, Mark?
I looked at the trajectory of the company. I looked at what I thought was within reach based on, recent quarter success, looked at our organization, and, used some analytical approaches in our tooling to, come up with, well, let's start with what can we do with growth of existing logos and wins in new logos, and set a plan that I thought was, frankly, um, had cushion in it enough that we could achieve it. And then after setting the top line, figuring out what the operating expenses need to be to really hit our bottom line. And we're operating in a, cash flow neutral to cash flow positive business, and we intend to keep it that way.
Hmm. Now, when people set plans like this, there's always this tension. You set a goal that's achievable, you get there, you might have set a goal too low, or and people get excited. They've met the goal, but you could have done, if you're here, you could have done here. Talk about that.
So I think of the metaphor, which maybe millennials will never understand, because it's the metaphor of driving a manual transmission car, of working the clutch and the accelerator, right? So, finding where that traction happens. And so I look at what we think our sales trajectory will be, and we plan our operating expenses and our resources to be underneath that. and we want the market to pull us up. We want the market, the demand, we want to be catching up with demand. The great hidden secret is that even in every great successful company and the huge, wonderful winners out there, there's chaos in all of them. It's not that the bad startups are chaotic and the ones, the Salesforces of the world, were just smooth sailing from start to finish. There's always chaos. Um, but the chaos that you want is you want to be having to catch up with demand. You don't want to be over your skis from an operating expense and from an organizational perspective. And so I plan both from a financial standpoint and an organizational standpoint, to be resourced just under, you know, our our expectations and then grow into it. So we're always lagging a little bit.
Yeah, the easiest problem to solve is you don't have enough resources to meet your demand, right? It's a much more difficult problem to solve going the other way, isn't it? Much more painful. Actually, it may be easier to solve, it's just very painful.
Correct.
All right, well, let's move on to sustainability of growth. And, you have, organizations, some organizations can, the common complaint I hear is the growth is erratic. Your great quarter followed by a lackluster quarter followed by a great quarter, and you know this is pretty frustrating to management teams, to boards. And it may not even be a quarter; it could be a year. How do you improve not just for a quarter or two, but build sustainable change here? What's the difference in?
I think one of the keys in today's environment where we have SaaS and we have subscription-based models is to ensure that you keep your customers and that you grow your customer base revenue, so net dollar retention or whatever measure you like. And because of that, one of the things that we are completely redefining is the entire surface area between us and our customers. And so our entire customer experience team and our playbook, if you will, and our processes are being redefined and redefined from the customer point of view. Um, I can go in detail if you like. I think it's a really important and interesting story.
Well, do you think you're building sustainable transformation, or are you not sure yet?
Well, no, I know that we are, and I know that we are because I talk to customers, and I have executives on my team that talk to customers, and the feedback is strong. And the reality is that software is always going to break. There's always going to be bugs, and the key is to be accountable and to not make a habit of it, right? And so establishing relationships with the economic executives and our customers, and letting them have a place to give feedback, an individual, an executive to speak with, is absolutely critical. And we build goodwill throughout our customer journey, so that when that time happens that inevitably something goes wrong, we have that goodwill and patience because we have the trust of the customer.
All right, so I'll challenge you on that. You think you're building sustainable change, but you just know that you have historically. You don't really know what will happen in the future, so you hope you're building sustainable change. Isn't that the challenge?
I know that we're building stronger relations in our customer base, and that our customers are generally growing entities, and we grow with them because we are a consumption-based, revenue and software model. Um, so I know that with the bedrock is strong, and I know that we're delivering and responding to customer needs. But can we grow and acquire new logos fast enough? We absolutely have not nailed that yet, and that is the current focus.
And it's mostly driven by new logo acquisition now. It's not expansion and existing relationships.
There's both. They're both. And so we need to have a dual focus. And frankly, we need to reorganize. We are reorganizing so that, the teams are not crosswise in terms of who's focusing on new logos and who's focusing on expansion and keeping customers happy. And the major change is that we're redefining our customer success team based on the customer journey from the customer's point of view. And we know the customer's point of view because we asked them. We interviewed customers and they identified points that we should know about and we do know about, but we didn't understand the impact. So we found 4 or 5 very important friction points where we either make the day and are heroes or we stumble and fall. And so our focus is on how do we resource, how do we respond, and how do we plan for those events because we know that they're going to happen.
And those events you uncover, or those opportunities you uncovered, those were with existing customers. Did you grow the relationship as a result of that?
We did, and we gained trust. And sometimes grew revenue. We certainly grew relationships at the higher levels. So beyond just the operating folks who use our software on a day-to-day basis, we continue to prove our ROI, daily, and then those are all keys to success. So far, yes, we've been successful in generally retaining customers and growing them over time.
Okay. Well, all right. So that brings us to, I think, one of your mantras. um, you have a mantra. I think if I got it right, is it GFOC? All right, GFOC. Tell us about GFOC and how you've used GFOC to help grow Sift.
Yes, I once put this very long acronym that was meaningless to people on a slide, and it was the first letters in these words: nothing bad ever happens when you get in front of a customer. So the key is get in front of customer.
Yeah, the last part's the only part that matters, right? Yeah.
GFOC, right? And so we went on a very aggressive spree and sprint from the very beginning with the new team to get in front of customers. And it's not just the salespeople, it's me, it's all my direct reports. It's getting in front of them with our product lead and chief product officer and explaining, where we're going with product and what's coming down the road. And the response has been tremendous. Again, get people to know us, to like us, and to trust us. And customers don't always like you in those moments of difficulty, but if they trust you, you can have those two things held at the same time. In fact, one of my team in one company actually made GFOC pins and took it on himself to kind of crusade about this. And it really is true. I mean, in the software industry, we tend to close a sale and go away and not come back until we're trying to renew. And we are fighting fraud every single day, and we're working with a customer base that is incredibly passionate about also fighting fraud. And we have to be visible and available all the time. And so when I joined, we created executive sponsorship. All of our top 100 accounts have executive sponsors. We get out on the road, we get in front of the customers, and we both let them know what's happening, how we're doing, and we also get feedback. And we ask for and get very frank feedback.
Okay, GFOC, everybody. It sounds somewhat obscene, but it's not. It's really easy. Just get in front of customers.
Getting in front of the customers, yes.
Okay, Mark, that's great. This is great. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Los Angeles area, in the suburbs, and went to a large public high school, and then moved to Boston for 10 years. Was an undergrad and grad student at MIT, and then worked in both venture and startups there, with a brief stint back on the West Coast as an engineer in the aerospace world, working essentially as a contractor to the government. So I worked on systems and systems control for anything the Air Force put in space in the early Star Wars days.
Can you tell us about those?
Just that there was a well-known program called Milstar, and what you see in today's world in reporting in terms of the the secure domes, the golden domes over Israel, and that we use to protect against inbound missiles. That was thought of, I think it goes all the way back to the Reagan 80s, and we were working on it in the late 80s then, and it's much more effective and modernized now.
Okay, so you came out of MIT and got a job as an engineer and then somehow got into venture capital. How'd you make that transition?
Well, I decided after a number of large projects that I was more interested in the commercial aspects and business and how you take that technology and turn it into interesting business. And I got in my head that the place that you learn that is in venture capital. That's where creation happens. And this was in the late 80s when, a venture capitalist found a great deal. The first thing they did was call their best friend at another venture firm, and they would go look at it. Hey, come look at this deal with me together.
Together, come look at this together with me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Today, you're elbowing your best friend out of the deal, right? I mean, it's a very different world today. Um, and I was fortunate enough to land a job at Charles River Ventures in Boston and really saw how the venture industry worked. I helped them um, raise a fund. I actually co-wrote a piece of software that was essentially a CRM before we had the term CRM. And that also helped inform me about product and the like. So I went from Charles River into one of their portfolio companies where I ran product management for. This was a company not well known, but called Channel Computing, and we had one of the early BI products. And in fact, it was so early that we didn't really have the term business intelligence. So it was us and business objects, and grew it from kind of zero to single digit millions before we had an acquisition offer that the board just decided to take. And so I was there for 2+ years, and went on to business school, and after business school came back to the West Coast.
West Coast. And so you said you were born in California, LA.
LA area. I grew up in the LA area, but came back to the Bay Area.
Okay, so what'd you do as a kid growing up in LA that taught you about venture capital engineering and sales transformation?
Absolutely nothing. I was I was a competitive kid always. I was curious. Um, and I think, going to MIT really got me into, again, the idea of understanding technology, wanting to understand how things work, thinking about things as systems. And then MIT just taught me how to take what seems to be an insurmountable problem and break it into pieces and solve it.
How'd you choose or desire to want to go to MIT? It's, from the West Coast. It's obviously a prestigious school, but
I was a math and science nerd. I loved science. I actually loved physics and astrophysics. I was a avid reader of nonfiction in science, from subatomic particles to cosmology. And the reality is, I thought I wanted to study physics and wanted to go to Harvard. And a few things happened. One is I didn't get into Harvard, and I did get into MIT. And the other is that I realized, well, I don't want to be a professor, and I don't want to be in a lab. So I switched from the idea of majoring in physics to electrical engineering, which I thought was much more practical.
which is if I don't know what electrical engineer is, what course 6, as I recall, and physics is what?
Yes. Everything at MIT is a number.
Yeah, that's right. Make it easy for you.
Yeah. So you would have class 6001 in lecture hall 10100 at 10 a.m. So it's just a bunch of numbers.
You have fond memories of walking down the infinite corridor at MIT?
Oh, I have memories of walking down the corridor at 2 a.m., which are being exhausted, but yes, I still think the place has just incredible energy to it.
Actually, so I have a story here to tell about the infinite corridor. Um, so for the listeners, if you don't know, I'm an MIT grad as well from business school, and but when I graduated from MIT, I had a car that I was trying to sell, And so, back then, the way you sold a car was you put, little flyers up on bulletin boards on the Infinite Corridor at MIT. So I was there stapling my advertisement for the used car on the bulletin boards down the Infinite Corridor. And as it was Sunday morning, it was early, and it was probably like 8 a.m. on Sunday. It was completely empty. And as I passed there's an elevator that goes to some library up. I've forgotten what it is, but what I'm talking about. And some gentleman comes out of the elevator. The doors open, and in broken English, he's clearly Asian. He approaches me and my friend who are out there stapling this. He says to us in very broken English, "Can you tell me how to get to Harvard?" And I looked at him, and this big smile comes across I've been waiting my whole life for this line. I said, "Study." And I broke up, of course. And he didn't get it at all because he barely spoke English. So, and then, of course, now I'm telling you, all right, if you go down the hall for about a mile, turn right, go 2 miles up, and you'll be there. And of course, he didn't trust me. But that's my experience with the Infinite Corridor at MIT. Yeah, study, study, study. All right, so you knew the line. I waited my whole life up to that point.
It's notable that, so for those who don't know, the Infinite Corridor is the main hallway from the steps on Mass Ave, the well-known entry to the main academic buildings, and it runs all the way through, I guess a couple of sets of buildings, and at the very end is one of the largest lecture halls, which you are likely to have a class in your freshman year. And so if you think about it, the first thing you do as a freshman at MIT is you go up the steps and you have to traverse an infinite hallway to get to your class, which of course everyone knows you can't traverse an infinite hallway. So it's kind of a fun paradox.
Yeah. Well, it's not infinite. It's just long.
It's just long, but yes.
It's just long. Yeah. It just appears infinite. All right. Well, this was great. Tell us, Mark, how can people reach you? And would you share your contact information?
Sure. You can see us at sift.com, and you can find me at mfriend@sift.com. And if you have interest in working in fraud, or you are any form of online commerce purveyor or company, we love to hear from you. We are exceptional at marketplaces, online gaming, e-commerce, SaaS, and we love what we do, and we're very good at it.
You're passionate about it. I can tell.
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, Mark. I'm sure our listeners will love this conversation. Many of them have the same issues that you're dealing with, and there's no right or wrong answers with many of them. There's just different approaches. Sometimes some will work better than other times, but I'm sure that they'll appreciate your insights and what you shared here. Thank you for being on the show.
And thank you again for having me. Really appreciate it.
And all right. And that brings us to the end of another episode. I'll see you on the next one, folks. Bye for now.
Mastering Sales Leadership podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.